And David Wood
has absolutely no clue.
And David Wood
Has absolutely no clue.
And David Wood
is absolute ridiculous nonsense.
They bring it to Allah, and they bring it to Muhammad, and so Allah the Exalted sent down the Quranic verse, and all married women are forbidden unto you, except those captives whom your right hands possess. That is to say, they are lawful for them when they complete their waiting period. So once it's seen that the woman is not pregnant, then it's okay to have sex with her, even though she's married, even though her husband's still alive, even though her husband's right there. That's something that bothers me.
When I was wrestling between Islam and Christianity, that to me was the biggest thing, was how in the world can the Quran allow for the raping, it's a rape, of captive women when their husbands are right there. It's a rape. It's a rape. It's a rape.
أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ, what your right hands possess. And of course this is a big bone to pick among Western academics. You know, how come Islam allowed for women slaves and all of this stuff? The first response that you need to understand is that, you know, if you just change the terminology just a tad bit, just a little bit, I'll take 5 more minutes and I'm done, inshallah. If you change terminology just a little bit, historically speaking, when were women taken as captives in situations of war? I'm not talking about the Islamic civilization alone. Historically speaking, any civilization, when are women taken as prisoner? Either under prostitution or under war, right? They're taken as captives, POWs. Now, either of those scenarios, how pleasant are they for women? Those two situations in which women are under another's rule, another's, authority. Both of those situations are horrendous, even today. If women are captured in a village by a military, you know what happens. In our times, by the most civilized army, right? By the most humanistic army. The army that takes 2 years of ethical training, and then goes and takes over a village, what happens to those women too, right? Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, and our deen isn't in idealism, our deen is in practical realities. The practical reality is this situation will occur. There will be women that will be in that situation. So what do you do with them? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put them under the authority of the believers. And the other interesting thing in this is that, POWs, you can do whatever you want, unthinkable things with them, and nobody can question you. But this is not the case with malakat aymanukum, what your right hands possess. They have rights. Their children have a shared inheritance. Practically they enjoy everything a wife enjoys. The only difference is the term nikah. And why not the term nikah? It's a very simple thing. You know the nikah is a transfer of responsibility. It's a contract which transfers responsibility from who to who. It transfers responsibility from the previous wali to the new wali. The previous wali was who? The father, if there's a brother or a grandfather, somebody, the man of the house, right? And now who's the new wali? The husband. It's a transfer of responsibility. In situations where the woman was already inside your house. Before Islam, even the Sahaba owned some women. They're already there. If you do nikah technically means transfer of responsibility. So who are they transferring responsibility from? Themselves? It doesn't make sense. So what do you have to have? The responsibility itself. The transfer is not so important as the responsibilities themselves. So what does Quran and Sunnah do? It reveals the responsibilities in those situations. In case there's a transfer, nikah. In case there's no transfer, the responsibilities apply. You follow? So this is the second thing. So it's semantics. And if you just look at this one word, responsibility, and you say, you know what, you have a problem with the word concubines? Let's talk about the word responsibility. Let's talk about Western society, where every 2.5 to 3 minutes a rape is taking place, and teenage girls in public schools are getting pregnant, and they don't know who did it. And this hideous society is coming to life, and nobody's taking the one word. Nobody's taking responsibility. Nobody's taking responsibility. They don't even know where to go. And there's this chaotic situation in the society. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He reveals something that takes care of the chaotic situation in society. And the final comment about this, probably the most important one. Between ayahs number 32 and 33 of Surah An-Nur, which is the next surah. This is Al-Mu'minun, the next surah is Surah An-Nur. 32 and 33, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is homework for you. Read tafsir of 32 and 33 of Surah An-Nur. In those ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened the door for women that were owned at the time, that they can work their way to getting married to somebody and earn their freedom. And once that happened, the only women that were left in the possession of right hands of the Muslims were either women that were, in some way handicapped, that couldn't get married for whatever sickness or something else, or they were too young to get married. There was the only two kinds of women left. Every other woman, they worked their way towards freedom, and this is a historical fact within the Sahaba's time. And that door to that, that reform in society was open by just two ayat of Quran, 32 and 33 of Surah An-Nur, right? So this is a historical phenomenon that we have to understand. People are making criticism about our book, and they seem like heavy criticisms only for one reason: we don't know our book. That's the only reason it feels like, oh my God, how do you respond to that? When they tell us, kill them wherever you find them, the ayah they quote from Surah At-Tawbah or Surah Al-Baqarah and other places, right? قَاتِلُوهُمْ وَاقْتُلُوهُمْ, kill them and fight them and kill them and fight them. How do we respond to that? And since we haven't studied our book, we don't know how to respond. But the reality of the matter is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this book to people who have decent fitrah, right? Which means everything that is in Qur'an and everything that is in the Sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ appeals to decent human beings. It's just a matter of explaining it properly. Not compromising anything, it just has to be explained properly. Like the issue of concubines, put it in perspective to historically POW women, and it sounds like the most humane solution. Go to a woman that's imprisoned, a woman that's been imprisoned in a camp in China, or somewhere in Europe, right? Or in Russia or somewhere. And you give her the option, this is what Qur'an is offering you, and you can stay here if you want, because this is the Western solution. What would you take? You ask a professor somewhere sitting in a university, on the leather couch, discussing these things, he'll say, well, the Western solution is better. And ask a woman that's in that state, she'll say, I'll take the Islamic solution, please. Right? Because it's grounded in reality, not in theory. That's what it is. So we have to have confidence in our deen. These things that are mentioned, they're not controversial, they're not things to be ashamed of, they're things that will actually poke a bigger criticism on society. Why aren't you looking at this solution? Do we have to tell you this? Or you're telling us to do your way, that's obviously not working, right? So, إِلَّا عَلَىٰ أَزْوَاجِهِمْ أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ غَيْرُ مَلُومِينَ. Then they are not to be blamed. فَمَنِ ابْتَغَى وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْعَادُونَ. Then whoever pursues a way other than that, even if Allah made the halal means open, somebody pursues another way, then they are the ones that have transgressed. They are the ones that have transgressed. Inshallah ta'ala, we're just going to discuss that part of it. The pursuit of ways other than marriage. And how the Muslim community has made the halal way of marriage so profoundly difficult for its youth, that the haram way is so much easier an option.
Why does Islam allow a man to have sex with their slave women? That one I did not expect to come from you guys. This is stating it, this is coming from something very beautiful, from a very ugly position. This is something, everything in Islam is good for everybody. So it will be good for the men, it will be good for the women. It will be good for the master, it will be good for the slave, if Islam is followed. So when you ask a question like this is saying it in a very ugly way. Throughout history, there have always been women who were raped, who were abused, and regardless of what religion people were in, the women still suffered from this, even today. I just read it in this morning in statistics about how many few minutes in the United States a woman is raped. Every few minutes, like I think they said 5 minutes. It's happening right now in the United States. How about the rest of the world? What Islam is saying here is what's a limit. But you have to understand, before Islam came, they had no limits. These Arab people, these Bedouin people, had no limits. Just like in most of the world today, really there's no real limit on how many girlfriends you can have. Even here in Malaysia, which is a very religious place, it really is beautiful. But tell me what statutes you have on the books that tells you how many girlfriends you can have. How many boyfriends can you have? Is there a law that if a girl and a boy are walking down the street holding hands right now, that they're going to go to jail? Saudi Arabia has it. They do. They don't allow it in public. But if a guy has a girlfriend and he can get away with it, he'll get away with it even over there. Even over there, they get away with it. What we're talking about with this instance, you need to really investigate what it talks about right hand possess. What happens at the end of a war is that there are people there still when the war is over, because it's not like America where we go in and use a bomb to blast everybody away. You know, we solve the problem, you know, we get rid of everybody. But in those days, they used to only kill the warriors. Well, who's left? And so the women were treated horrible. You know, that, to call them a slave would be nice compared to what things happened to those women. You don't want to know, because it became like, we're going to get revenge. Even after we killed the guy, we're going to do stuff to his children, to his women, to, you know, and they did it. And this is not permitted in Islam. The women were taken into custody, because where else would they go? Where are they going to go? You just wiped out all the men that were fighting anyway. So the women become custody of state. And they don't want to set up like an orphanage or something, or a women's shelter. They go to the men who are fighting. The men become responsible to feed, clothe, take care of them, but those women have to work for their keep, and that's what they are. Today you'd call them servants. But you had to treat them in a very special way. And that was never before. So what's happening actually is that there were limits set forth that were never there before in favor of these women who were actually the wives or daughters of the very people that were just killing you. And now you're giving them good service. Actually allowing them, that they could just come in, and some of them actually did it, and tried to kill the people who were taking care of them. But if you wanted, as a man, you wanted, oh, I don't have a wife, and I'm not able to get a wife, and it's in the Quran, what can I do? Well, these women, you can marry her if she's a believer. But she can't be a pagan anymore. If she's a pagan, you can't marry her, can you? No. But if he has intercourse with this lady and she does something wrong, she doesn't have the same punishment as a believer, does she? Do you remember that? Did you notice that was a reason? The things that are here, and I wish we had more time, and we're almost out of time, but the things that are in this subject are so big, and if you explore it, you'll find that this is something amazing, because it is, in fact, a chance for her to come to Islam, which is the best thing that could happen to anybody, and to be married to a Muslim who is going to care for her 100%. And all of that is also to help him and keep him away from getting in trouble. So it helps both sides. But you need to study it and realize that it's not about, you know, owning, but going out and buying some people today. Let's go down to the store and buy a couple of people and, you know, make some slaves. It was about releasing them, because even then he has to release her. She can't be a slave anymore. So Islam was encouraging to get away from this idea of slavery at the same time. So you go check it out. Do a lot of research before you ask a question, especially don't ask it like that.
Incident of the famous one, أو ما ملكت أيمانكم, meaning that a Muslim man is allowed to marry up to 4 women with rules that he has to be fair. If she does not like it, she would ask for a divorce. So adultery does not happen. And so, and this is very missed by many Muslim scholars, and in America, the second wife is a human being too. She would walk around as a wife, and her children are legitimate. She's not a mistress, she's not a girlfriend. If it has to happen, and it's happening left and right, then she's a wife. If the first wife does not like it, as a major change in marriage, like, you know, whatever that happens, if he's a miser who loses his job, or he starts drinking, or violent, whatever that happens in any marriage, these massive changes, she can ask for a divorce. But then, in conditions of war, at the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed him to actually have sexual relationships with more than 4 wives. أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. What's the story? He calls them 6 slaves.
In his book.
In his book. What's the story? Muslims go to a battle in a harsh desert. They win. Now their wife and children are left over. What to do with them? The trick that they play on you, you know, as if it were in the 21st century in Midtown Chicago or in Midtown Manhattan, is that, you know what they do? The Muslim soldiers take him back home as 6 slaves. But you're talking about the middle of the 7th century in a hard desert. Okay, they would leave him. What would happen to them? Wolves would eat them alive. They're going to be enslaved. They're going to be tortured. They're going to be prostituted. They're going to be killed. What would happen next? You're going to bring him to the Muslim society and leave him without a sponsor. What would happen? You force them into stealing and cheating and prostitution to survive. How are they going to survive? That the most civil way is to find a foster for them, a sponsor for them. How would that work? A Muslim man who has the ability and the financial ability to take him exactly as wives, but without giving him the title of a wife. Why? For inheritance right. Because when you're a wife, you have certain inheritance rights and lineage rights. And she would be treated exactly like a wife. She is in the same living standard, and he would be responsible for her. It would be her own reputation. Her children are legitimate, and they are his. As soon as she gives birth to a child, then that child carries the name of the father, and she's free to stay with him or to start his own life, without forcing her to become a Muslim or anything like that. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in the middle of the 7th century said, whoever had such a woman, taught her manners, educated her, taught her how to read and write, treated her well, and then set her free and married her, then he would get double the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So that woman that you're talking about now, that the man educated her to care
taught
for
her manner, care for her, now she is a wife. If he has, if he has only one wife, or for the first time to get married.
Yeah.
A genius solution, a merciful solution. And it's not like, you stay with this man one day and the other man one day. She's like a wife. It's his reputation. Her children are named after him, and there couldn't be any better solution at the time than this.
This is just another detail of the proofs and proofs. I mean, if you really look at this, just because obviously if you go deep into the Quran, you see it's memorized by millions. There's no other book like it. The scientific facts tells you what the purpose of life is, where you're going. When you die. Everything is there. No book like it.
Interesting stuff.
Deuteronomy 21 verses 10 to 14. When you go out to war against your enemies, and Yahweh your God gives them into your hand, and you take them captive, and you see among them captives a beautiful woman, and you desire to take her to be your wife, and you bring her home to your house, she shall shave her head and pare her nails, signs of mourning, mourning the loss of her loved one.
That's something that bothers me.
Mourning the loss of her loved ones. She shall take off the clothes in which she was captured, and she'll remain in your house and lament her father and her mother a full month. After that, you may go into her and be her husband. After that, you may go into her and be her husband.
Then it's okay to have sex with her, even though she's married, even though her husband's still alive, even though her husband's right there. That's something that bothers me.
That according to Christianity, Jesus is the God of the Old Testament. That's an established belief. In Numbers chapter 31, Jesus tells Moses to execute all Midianite men, boys, married and divorced women, and only the young girls who have not known a man to keep alive for yourselves. Now, how did they know if a girl was a virgin or not? By raping them. This is the answer. It then states that 32,000 young girls had been discovered.
That's something that bothers me.
Discovered as not knowing men, right? And were taken and placed into the custody of the men of Israel. The exegesis of Numbers chapter 31 in the Talmud, Tanaim Midrash Sifrei 157, states that girls as young as 3 years and 1 day were forcefully consummated into marriage.
When I was wrestling between Islam and Christianity, that to me was the biggest thing.
3-year-old girls were raped by order of Jesus Christ. This is Christian belief, and there's no way out of it for you. There's no way out of it. You believe Jesus is God? Yes. You believe the Old Testament is the inerrant Word of God? Yes. So you are stuck in this quagmire. Unless you're a Marcionite. I doubt any Christian here is a Marcionite. You believe that the God of the Old Testament was an inferior God. No, you believe that was Jesus. What's your solution? Change your theology. Because God sent His final messenger, His holy apostle, Muhammad al-Mustafa, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to lift you out of this quagmire.
I like that. Don't do it. They're married. Stop it. Control yourself.
son David would.
Be consistent, that otherwise you're inconsistent. And if you're inconsistent, you're not being honest.